You guys excited for your capstone check-ins tomorrow? I am. I'm excited to see where you guys are at. I've been seeing little glimpses of cool stuff.
I was able to what I was trying to do yesterday, I was able to pull all the posters from TMDB into my capstone. Now all I have to do is work on the back end of the logic to match two reviews.
Nice.
So
that's great progress.
What I'm trying to do is how do I set up two users in local storage, which I can do right now. So what I'm doing is I have given two inputs on that page. Just named it user 1 and user 2. And as soon as someone clicks on, say, a slider or rates or reviews a movie, it pulls in that username into a object. Is there any other way to do that?
You're saying for before you're using databases, just to do it. I mean, you could make it so that you could have one set of inputs, fill them out, and when you hit, submit, store that in an object, and just put that object in an array, and just however many times you fill it out, store each set in its own object. I mean, is that what you're asking?
Yes, pretty much.
And then you could look through that array and make comparisons from one profile to the other. Just treat each profile like an object.
Gotcha. Yes, that makes sense. So I was trying to do that, but I ended up creating one big array which has both the users in there and the rating. So I got to work on that. But maybe I'll book a one-on-one maybe.
Sure. Having them both in the same array is fine, as long as they're separate objects, right? If each
right
is
I mean there's one big array which has one object for each movie that's rated, and within that object is a user key that has a value of user 1 or user 2, and it's all in one big array. But you can filter it out. Yeah, but do you think it's advisable to have different ones?
So I would put users and movies in two separate arrays, and then you have a way in the user profile. So when you do it in the databases, every entry is going to have an ID, a unique ID, and then you cross-reference those. So if this user has rated this movie, so you might have another table in the database that's ratings, and a rating would have all the ratings. It would also have the key for the movie that it's talking about and the key for the user that made this rating. So you make different tables for each of your conceptually separate pieces, and where they need to be tied together, you do it by associating the IDs. So just for
I see. Yeah.
Just for doing it as preliminary on the front end, for practice before you get to doing the databases, you could have an array of movies and an array of users, and then in each user you could just say movies, have a list. Each user has a movies list with movies and their ratings for those movies.
Gotcha. No, that sounds, that's a much better plan. Totally. Thank you.
The more you can keep the data separate, smaller pieces to wrap your head around, at least for me, I've found is a good approach.
No, that's a good idea. Thank you.
And when I was talking about tying the different database tables together, Max will get into the actual details of how to do that. I was just sort of giving a conceptual model of how you do it.
Sorry, I'm late. I wrote 650 lines of code today, and I was literally on 649 at 5:30, and it's I will finish this. And sure enough, I got it working. So sorry I'm late. I just had to finish everything up there.
That's great that it worked when you Rather than demanding another however many minutes.
We are integrating our chatbot system at work with HubSpot CRM and chatbot system. And so I've been working with the confines of their APIs. So if you think New York Times on steroids, that's what I've been doing all day long. So my brain is mostly here enough, I should say. All right. We've got options tonight. We can either make it no, Jen, I'm not taking the night off. You cannot get rid of me that easily. We have two options here. We can either dive into portfolio project and get more practice on moving a React project over. Or we can just make it an open office hours, give you guys 3 hours to work on your capstone and answer questions as they come up. So I'm going to launch a poll for that. Give me 1 second to make it. All right. Any questions on what we can do tonight?
What would you suggest would be more important?
I kind of lean towards the capstone, only because this is your chance to like really get ahead. The check-in is coming up tomorrow. So I think it's good to work on that and have someone kind of nearby to be able to answer questions. But at the same time, there's a lot of value in just getting experience, moving things over, practicing with that, all that kind of stuff. It is a very close vote. So Doug, do you want to cast a vote?
I mean, am I voting what I want to see, or am I voting what I think everybody should do? I'm interested in seeing some more React.
Okay, so poll wise, we are almost completely split. So here's what I will say. If you would like to work on your capstone, I'm trying to remember, I don't think you can send, if you're in a breakout room, I don't know if you can send me a message or not in the Zoom chat. I think that's a stupid limitation, but one of those things that like once you're in a room, you're in timeout and can't access anyone in the main room, which I think is kind of dumb. But I can put you guys in a breakout room. If you want to work on capstone, work on capstone. When you guys have a question about your capstone, shoot a message in Slack, or if there's like a help button in Zoom or some way of letting us know that you have a capstone question, let us know. We'll try and take like 3 or 4 breaks throughout the portfolio project, switch over, answer any capstone questions, and then you guys can hop back in for that. So if you are feeling like you are on maximum overload, if you just want time to work on your capstone, actually, you know what? This is going to be a better way of doing it. If you want to work on your capstone, drop out of the meeting. When you have questions that pop up, that you're stuck, that you need help debugging, that you don't know what to do next, come back into the meeting and raise your hand. If you want to work on your capstone. If you want to get more React portfolio exposure, practice setting up routes from scratch, practice moving existing code over, all of that stuff, stay in the meeting and we will do that during class. Does that sound good?
And is leaving the meeting mean leaving Zoom or a breakout room?
Leaving Zoom, and then you can come back if you have questions. that make sense for everyone? Does anyone have capstone questions before they leave? Or capstone questions before we get started on the portfolio project?
I have just a question. So, if we, cause I plan on working on my capstone. So when we come back, is it all right? Like if we have questions, if we get in a breakout room with Doug or something?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Or we can do them together as a class too. That's fine. Either way, we can make that work.
All right. Thanks.
Yep. Doug, I'm making you co-host now so you can do your breakout rooms as
Okay,
requested. I can stop sharing this. And of course, you're welcome to stay if you want to work on your capstone and just hear the portfolio project in the background. That's also totally fine.
I have a quick question.
Yes, Plush, go for it.
Sorry.
Sorry. Yeah. In our portfolio, like what at this point, what is like worth putting on the portfolio? Like there's like in New York Times, there's capstone, of course. And what else?
Anything that you would be proud to show off to a potential employer, right? So anything that you could take that project and then go like, hey, look, this is what I made. These are the struggles that I went through. I know this code well enough that I can kind of explain to you line by line what's happening. I remember doing that project enough, and I could probably do that project from scratch with maybe a little help from the video or a little help from the code I already wrote before. I can kind of do that project on my own. What you don't want to do is take a project we've done in class just for the sake of, hey, I did this project, let me put it up there and be done and over with it, right? Because I would much rather see 3 to 6 bigger projects that you're really proud of, projects that you can explain, than 35 different projects you did all throughout class. So it's really the projects that maybe you went a little above and beyond on, that you did some additional styling. It's projects that you added additional comments in to make sure that you really understood it. It's those projects that you're like, you would be proud to take it home and put it on your fridge for your parents to see it, right? That's what we want your portfolio to be. And that will be different for everyone. There's no cut and dry, like, oh, use movie theater and blog and, you know, whatever else. You're welcome to use the projects that we do in class, but it's that above and beyond threshold that I would use to determine, hey, what are maybe the top 6 projects that I'm really proud of that I would like to show off to an employer, and those are the ones I would use.
Totally makes sense. Thanks.
Jen, did you have a question?
I was just gonna say from the breakout room, can't we go back and forth, like back into this room and then back into that one? In case we have a question.
Can. Yep, I can open that. I can open a breakout room for that.
So finally, are we leaving Zoom or are we going in a breakout room?
Either one, it's up to you.
Okay.
I'm gonna let participants choose. And we'll call this open that. So any final questions before we split up here? Okay, so if you want to work on your capstone and don't want to hear me for 3 hours go do the portfolio project, you can move into the breakout room now, or you can drop out of the meeting. If you do have questions, though, come back into the main session, either rejoin the meeting or move yourself out of the breakout room and raise your hand, just because I probably won't notice when you rejoin the room. So if you have any questions at any point, raise your hand, come off mute, scream bloody murder. Otherwise, feel free to head over to the breakout room or drop out of the meeting and come back in if you have any questions as they pop up. All right. All of that said, does anyone need help, breakout room help? Okay. With all of that said, we are going to get our portfolio project started. All right. Hopefully you know the drill by now. We're going to head to our terminal. This time I'm not going to cheat. I'm going to use my CD, my PWD, and my LS. So I'm going to PWD. That tells me I am in my home folder. I'm going to CD to my C5 my code. No, I'm not. I'm going to CD to my desktop. Now that I'm in my desktop, I can LS to see all my files. I know my C5 my code is here, so I'm going to CD into my C5 my code. I'm going to CD into my week 16, and I am going to mkdir for make directory, and I'm going to call that day 3. CD into my day 3, and then I am going to npx create React app portfolio. And I'll call it React-portfolio just so we don't mix the two of them up. While it's doing that, I will pop that folder open in my VS Code. We'll start a live share. We'll head to my app.js, clear out my header, head to my app.css. Oops. Delete that out, head back to my app.js, take out my logo.svg. And while I'm here, I know that I need multiple pages on my portfolio, right? I need to be able to click like the learn more button and have that switch over. So I am going to npm install my React router DOM. And I can close out of this terminal, head to my integrated terminal and npm start over there. That should bring me to my white page and give you your terminal back. And then the last thing I'm going to do is go hunt for my portfolio. Don't tell me, no, I didn't get that lucky. Week 4, day 4. Looks like the last day we did our portfolio. So I'm going to pull that up so I have code to reference. Week 4, day 4. Pop that in my VS Code. Over here, I can actually go live because it is vanilla HTML and JavaScript. And I'm going to start a live share of this one as well, just in case you find my code is easier to reference than your own code. And we should be off to the races. Anyone have questions? Anyone need help?
I don't need help at just 1 minute.
Mhm.
Connect to the second live share.
And Doug dropped the link in the chat. If you'd rather just reference my code on GitHub instead of doing it through the live share, you're also welcome to use that as well. Okay. Project setup wise, we've got we're using Bootstrap and we're also using material symbols. So I'm going to take both of those link tags, copy them, bring them over to my public index.html and drop those suckers right in my head tag. We haven't done this in the past, but it's also a good idea to update your title tag so it doesn't just say React app up at the top of it. So you can just call this like portfolio site or maybe Max's portfolio. Drop that in there. and we should be done with our index.html. Now, I want to think about my page structure here. We have this index.html, but it is quite lengthy. It is 165 files. So while it is tempting to take everything in this body and just whack it all in my app.js, probably not the best approach, right? This is the first time that we've had the ability to kind of refactor our code. Refactor just means go back in and clean it back up. Brandy, do you need help? Whenever Taylor appears in your video, I get worried.
As you should, really. I'm trying to get started. I'm struggling
Go ahead, share your screen.
with everything. No, okay. Great. No.
Should have a warning light go off whenever Taylor's detected in anyone else's video square.
Oh, I can't. I don't know which screen it's on. I need a minute. I need a minute.
If you just need a minute, that's fine. I just
Yeah.
didn't want to make sure that you were like struggling and then lost everything else.
I am struggling. And everything is great. But it's fine. I'll figure it out.
Well, if you feel really far behind, raise your hand and I can just like leapfrog you up to where you need to be. Okay.
Okay.
So over here, like I said, tempting to pull all of this over, but it's better to do
You
it.
gotta reshare.
Oh, thank you. It's better to do it piece by piece. So before we even dive into the very first thing of pulling this section over, I want to set up my router. Generally, it's better to set up multiple pages and get your router done at the beginning of the project, because then you don't have to take all of your code from app where it is working and kind of move it over to somewhere else. So I'm going to get my router started. And I know how to do this from memory because I've done it a gazillion times. That does not mean that you need to have this memorized. So if you do not have this memorized, you have two options. You have two options. You can either head over to the React router documentation. And no matter what language or what package we are using, unless it's a really, really tiny one, there is some documentation on it. So if you head over to their documentation and take a look at, in their navigation, they have a tutorial and a feature overview. So if we go to the tutorial, they will give you a breakdown of, hey, we need to npm install our React router. We've done that already. We also need to be able to set up a router like we did right here. And then we need to define our router, and then we can use our router provider. So do not feel like you need to have this stuff memorized. Just because I can pull it off the top of my head doesn't mean you need to be able to pull it off the top of your head. Corin.
For the link, did you delete the pre-existing stuff up there and then insert the link from portfolio? Okay.
Yes, I took for the bootstrap and material in public index HTML. These are the two links that I took over, and they are a direct copy and paste of the links right here. Oh, not the style, just the bootstrap and the material icons. So documentation is one option for pulling this information out, but it's not actually my preferred method for pulling it out. My preferred method for, hey, I can't really remember how I did this last time, go back to a previous project. If you know you have used Browser Router and it has worked, chances are you're going to be able to remember or refer to your own code much quicker than you're going to be able to refer to the documentation. So that's what I would recommend, is if you know it's working in another project, go back to that other project, pull that information out from there. Or if the documentation makes sense to you, that is totally fine to do as well. So once I get that set up, I need a little bit more work. I need to say, hey, my const routes are going to come from my create browser router. That is going to be an array that has a path. I always want to have a path of my empty slash, and that is going to show an element of my home page. And that is all we're going to get started with right now. Now, of course, if I'm referencing my home, I need to define that somewhere. So I'm going to go into my src. I'm going to make my new file. I'm going to call it home.js. I'm going to say const home equals a function that's going to return out a div. And I'm going to export my default home. I'm going to head back over to my app.js. I'm going to import my home from my /home. And finally, I need to use my route somewhere. So I'm going to use my router. Nope, sorry, I imported the wrong thing. This should not say browser router. This is wrong. This should say router provider. My bad. Router provider. Router equals my routes. And an extra curly brace there. If we save that, go back over to our browser, head back to Max's portfolio. I have no idea how I had that error there. I'm going to head back to my home.js, throw an H1 in here that says test. Not even using use state. Where? Oh, come on. You don't need the parentheses after a return. But syntax wise, it is preferred that you have them. Home. Default, import, React router DOM. Is it some stupid syntax thing that I'm doing? Path and element, path and element.
What if you just try stopping it and restarting it?
I did.
Oh, you did do that. You did it so fast, I missed it.
All right, well, here, this is how we debug. So I'm going to comment out my router provider. And I'm going to put just an H1 in here that says test, and that shows up. So something is off with my router. So I'm going to say router's the prop, router provider, create browser router. Well, let's try it like this. Let's take out home. And we'll put just an H1 in that says test. And that doesn't work. So that's gotta mean that the problem is with Kenny, just rub it in that yours is working and mine isn't, huh? I really have no idea what I did here.
Should we look at Kenny's code?
I will come to that option in 1 second if this doesn't work. Duh. I could swear I did that in the other terminal.
You did, you know what? When you did it really quickly, and I thought, did he CD into his React project?
I don't think I did.
And that
It should
answers my
not-
second question, which was, if you have it installed in the surrounding directory, does that work? Which apparently no.
Oh, and you know what? I bet you that's why I didn't get the right error message. So the error message I should have gotten on that was, and you know what? I just learned this with one of the other students during a one-on-one. If I didn't have that installed, this is a good lesson. That was a really weird error message, right? Because you're expecting it to say something like, dumbass, React router isn't installed. You can't import from it. Well, the problem is it was installed, but now NPM is very confused because I've got a node modules outside of the project. And then I also have React portfolio node modules inside of the project. That's a mistake. You never want them in two places. The correct place is inside React portfolio. So if I delete these out, now, hypothetically, if I didn't have React router installed, the error message I would have gotten is cannot resolve React router DOM. That's the error message I would have expected to get. But because I didn't have that, because I installed it at the wrong level, that's what was causing all the errors. So
If
always a good idea, PWD, make sure you're in the right spot, then NPM install it. Did you have a question, Doug?
Yeah, if you only had it installed in one place, but it was in the outer folder,
Would not have worked.
React would not have access to it. Okay, that was my
Nope.
question.
Has to be inside the node modules in the project folder.
Where is it pulling the use state from though? Like why like I could see an unknown like null error, but why was it specifying use state?
Because React
Is that-
router needs use state to work. And so it was like pulling in React router from the outer folder, but the outer folder didn't have React installed in it. React was installed on the inner folder. So it was really confused because it had 2 copies of node modules and neither one of them was complete.
Okay. And because it wasn't seeing a use state, it was looking for
Because
it.
React router was trying to use state from React, but React
Okay.
wasn't installed in the outer folder. React was installed on the inner folder.
Okay.
So it
Yep.
was like half was installed here, the other half was installed here, but both of them needed each other to work. Or when share screen. Okay, so you have just need to switch back to your terminal, Control C to stop, npm install react-router-dom, and then npm start again. Just make sure your CD.
You said Command C,
Control C to stop.
Control C.
Then npm install react-router-dom. Then npm start again after hitting enter after each command. And raise your hand again if you're still having issues. Randy, are you all caught up? Now's your chance. I totally delayed and made up a bug, you know, just to give us a run for the money and give you time to catch up. Okay. So now I've got my homepage. Nope. I still need to change my hello world here back to my home and make sure my home is imported. And now I get my test showing up from my home.js over here. So I am ready to rock and roll. First thing I'm going to do is I am going to look at my vanilla JavaScript 1. And I'm like, all right, this homepage has a lot of different sections in it, but the sections are logically broken down. This is commonly called the hero image or the hero section. It's kind of the big, normally it's got a background image behind it. It's got some content in it. We're going to call that the hero section. Then we've got the about, the contact, the portfolio, and my footer. So in an effort to kind of keep this code separate from each other, instead of just pulling over the whole thing, I'm going to break it down into components. And I'm going to go one by one on my components to make that work. Corin, share screen.
Maybe I just can't type today, but my bad.
Fine, apparently I can't react today.
Wait, no, that's not it. Honestly. I think that's it.
It's
You see
there we
it?
go. Yep. npm before install React Router DOM and npm space install space React -router DOM.
You said npm and okay.
npm
Route.
space install space React
Oh,
-router
dude,
DOM.
I kept putting install at the end. My dumb ass. Sorry, I've been staring at my computer screen all day, and this is.
I know the feeling, man. I know the feeling. All right. Section 1. I am going to make yet another component, and I'm going to call this hero.js. I set it up. I export it. I purposely left that return empty because we're going to pull over the code. I'm going to go not to my app.js. If I wanted this to be its own page, I would be putting in a new route for it in the router. But I don't want this to be a whole new page. I just want this to be a component that shows up on my home page. Because of that, I'm not going to add it to app.js. I'm going to add it to my home. So I'm going to take out my test and I'm going to add in my hero. Make sure your import works. Then I'm going to go back over to my vanilla HTML. I'm going to take this whole section, copy it, go back to my hero.js and paste that in after the return. Make sure you don't have a semicolon after your return and your HTML underneath it. Sometimes Prettier gets a little feisty on you and will put a semicolon in and just make all of your HTML not show up. So you definitely want to make sure that you've got that in there. Next up, we've got our classes. This one's easy. We only have 2 of them. So I'm going to manually change my class to my class name. If you would like to get fancy and use your Command F, you are welcome to do so. I go ahead and save that. I come back over to my browser and it looks like shit. But it's showing up. So if it's showing up, good. If not, take a minute, raise your hand if you need help. Again, make sure your imports are in your home That is the whole reason why we need a router in the first place, right? Sometimes we have components that we want to make their own separate components, but we don't want to make them their own pages. Without a router, we couldn't really control, what was a component and what was a page. Every component would be its own page if we didn't have a router. So the router is giving us control and saying, hey, where do we have those things show up? Kenny, good question. Are we changing the A tags, the anchor tags, to link tags? We only use link tags if they're linking to another page within our project. We know there's an exception for if we're making a tag link to an external website. Another exception to not using link tags is actually if we're linking to another section in our page, it's okay to leave them as anchor tags. We don't need to change them over to link tags. Only time we need the link tag is when we're hooking into some functionality that the router provides us. Okay, now let's tackle this. 2 reasons why our code can look like crap. Sometimes it is because we are using class names that are not defined. That is not the case here. We've got this justify content center, and we see that our content is being centered. That means we properly installed our Bootstrap. So Bootstrap isn't the problem here. What's the other thing that could cause some styling issues? Well, I've got a giant file of style.css over here. Fortunately, this style.css is set up to apply to the entire website on both pages. If it were not set up to do that, we would need to use Sass, set up our SCSS files, and make sure that when we were importing them in React, they were scoped down to the ID, where we basically said, hey, this component has its own ID. Let's make sure it only applies to that. So I'm going to copy my whole style.css, and I am going to plop that down in my app.css. Just like we componentize our HTML, we can componentize our CSS by using Sass and just limiting that down using those imports. So I go ahead and save that. I come back over to my browser, and now look at this lovely hero section that we have up and running. Everyone good? Anyone have questions? Anyone need a minute? Okay. Section 2. Don't worry, they won't be all this easy. We go back to our index.html. I go down, my about section is next. This one is pretty cut and dry. We can come over here, we right click on our src, we do our new file, we say about.js, we do our const about. That becomes a function. We return out the entire section from over here. We return that out here. Good reminder that we can return any kind of element. It does not have to be a div. We can return out semantic HTML. We could return out other components, all different kinds of things we could do there. However, we cannot return out multiple elements without using that React fragment, the tags that don't have anything inside of it. That's the only way we can return multiple things unless we put them in one giant div. I'm going to export my default about here. I'm going to let Prettier work its magic. I'm going to head back over. I don't want this in my hero. I want it below my hero. So I'm going to go ahead and close out my hero. I'm actually entirely done with my about, so I can close that out. I'm going to head back into my home, throw in my about here, go ahead and save that. Make sure it is imported because auto import in VS Code sucks. Save, come back over, scroll down, and I should have my about section. Now, I think I'm doing well here, but I'm comparing this to this, and all of a sudden I notice something. If my window is wide enough, this has a nice container going on the side of it. And if I pull this over, I still get a nice breathing room over here on the side. If I go back to my React version, I'm stuck all the way against the corners here. I really like that design element, right? Of having that little bit of breathing room here. We never want text content to take up a whole wide section of the screen. Because if you think about when we're reading our text, and this is purely from a design standpoint, if I'm reading this one and I read this line all the way over here, my eyes not only go down a line, but they have to move all the way back over to here in order to read the next line of text. That is why if you've ever looked at, traditional newspaper, you will notice the text is in columns. Those columns actually make it easier for your eye to take it from the end of the last line and go pick up the beginning of the next line. So that is why oftentimes we will use containers, because it's easier to read to the end of this line and then pick up the next line starting here than it is to go all the way over. Now, sometimes we will want to use a container fluid if we've got a image heavy design, if we're working with a really big screen and we want to take advantage of all of that screen real estate. But because we are using a text-based design, we definitely want to figure out why our container is working over here. Corwin, I'll come to you in 1 second. So I'm going to take a look at where my container is. My container is out here. This is a container for my entire home page. So I want to check one other thing, because I could just put the container on my home, or I could also put the container up at my app level. So what I want to do is I want to figure out, hey, do my other pages also use a container? In this case, they do. Both my pages use a container. For that reason, I'm not going to put it in my home.js. I'm going to put it all the way up at my app.js level. So I'm going to just throw my container in there, and now I should have my nice container effect rocking and rolling. Corwin, what's up? Or did you figure it out? You muted it and then unmuted yourself.
Whenever I click my down arrow, at the top bar, it shows me that the about page is there, but it doesn't show the actual information for some reason. And I have the import on the home.js.
Have the ID of about on your section?
Yeah, I got that on there too.
And case sensitivity is right in both of them?
That's all lowercase in that one. And then wait, home. Where's home? Okay.
It will be in hero.
Hero. I didn't import it in hero. Okay.
You don't need to import about in hero.
So what's going on with that?
Share your screen.
I don't know what I did there.
Did you guys get hack upstate shirts already? Or
All the
no?
cool kids that attended the happy hour got them.
And the
Ah.
material on them is really nice too. I meant to tell you.
Is there any more left or no?
There definitely are. We'll have them at graduation.
Graduation? That's a long time from now.
Well, we are supposed to be in person for class tomorrow, but I'm going to poll everyone at the end of class and see if anyone's actually going to show up, because if people are planning on not being there, we'll just do fully virtual.
Yeah, I won't be here tomorrow though, but I already told you why.
Yep, no biggie. Okay, so you've got your anchor tag for your about. I don't see anything wrong there. Let me see your home.js. Oh, you do need to put your so we don't need double divs here. Here we need to put our about section. So sorry, I was saying we didn't need to import our about in our hero page, but we do need to call about down here so it knows where to show up. And then the other thing we did is in our app.js, we threw a container on here. Nope. And you're good to go. Anyone else need help?
Thanks.
Okay. What's up next? We've got our contact section. So we are going to head over to our index. We are going to go down to our contact. We're going to copy that whole thing. I copy that whole section. I make my new component. I export it. And we immediately notice we've got some red in here. All of our contacts, or our comments, excuse me, need to be commented out again. So I'm single clicking on those lines, and then I'm hitting my command /. React syntax does not like HTML comments. JavaScript comments it has no problem with, but HTML comments it does not like. So we go in and we can manually fix them by just clicking on the line and hitting command /. Now we do have a buttload of classes in here, and that would be a pain to fix manually. So to do that all in bulk, I'm going to do my command F, find every time that I have a class equal, and replace it with a class name equal. Command F, use your little drop down here, class equals, class name equals, the little replace all button here, and then you are good to go. I save, I head back over to my home, I throw my contact in here, I import my contact, and we should have our contact page working over here. Finish our last easy section. The next section gets a lot harder. And Palash, just so happens that we are working with state in the next section, but go ahead with your question.
So mine is probably a little more specific to mine. What I'm doing is like as soon as I select an input using a range, and so as soon as I on change, I am running this function, this state called set rated, and I'm putting the value event target.value. But when I console log it, it does not show that value. When I do it the second time, that's when it shows that value.
Share your screen.
Okay. All right, so here we are. When I say select a genre, and for example, I rate Guardians of the Galaxy here. So as soon as I select it, it says it should be here, like it says undefined, right? This is where I'm like putting pushing this in. So this
Yep.
should change as soon as when I change it again, that's when you see the rating. Similarly, for like some other one, like first time is undefined and the second time it feeds in.
Let me see your code.
Yes. This setting it up.
Okay, so what ends up happening?
All this is running on change of one of the of the on change of that range input.
Okay, so here's what happens. This set rated is actually asynchronous, but there's no way that we can make it synchronous with just saying await. So this you're pulling in rated, but you would think that rated would be updated because you just set rated here. It
Mhm.
is actually updating, but this isn't fully done updating the set before this console log has a chance to run. So it is actually working in state. And the way that we can prove that is if we just delay this code and we say like, just hold your horses for even
2 seconds.
quarter of a second.
Okay.
Now, if I can actually type JavaScript, when we look at this and just clear this for didn't mean to do that. If I click here now, it makes a little liar out of me. Let's do
2 seconds.
I don't think that time is going to help. I think it's because I've got a closure. And Doug is now an expert on closures and can describe what one of them is.
Oh, sorry.
A closure is a function that has access to a variable in the outer scope.
Yes.
Is
So
that-
go ahead, Doug.
I was going to say, is that more or less?
Yeah.
a
So
description?
there's a more advanced JavaScript concept called closures that is basically saying, how does rating object get access to the rating object outside of it? Because it is outside of the scope of the inner function. So basically closures are whenever we take data from outside a function and access it inside the function without using parameters to pass that information in. But you were correct, upping that time just a little bit to 2 seconds was enough for us to see the proper rating come out from here.
Gotcha. Can you do me one favor and then see if it's like if I need to wait a couple seconds? And now if I do one, so it like puts in here, puts it stringifies the entire pushes it into an array and stringifies it and saves it in the local storage. So yeah, when I do that, it's doesn't say anything, like it says
So-
user is blank rated title. Yeah, then it doesn't like it still doesn't give anything. Should I-
Here's the better approach to this. Instead of getting hacky with a set timeout, instead of pulling the rated value from your whatever you're setting it, instead just reuse your event target value, and then it will be instantaneous.
Okay, okay. So usually like state takes like 1 or 2 seconds once in a while.
Yes. And
Got
it's
it.
not wrong to set it here and then reuse that event target value. But when the DOM is generating the event, the value is available instantaneously. What you're waiting on the set to do is basically go re-render the DOM with the new value. And that's why it happens asynchronously, because they don't want to block any of your other JavaScript from running while this is updating in the DOM.
So this also means like this is, since it's like since it's pulling like a couple seconds later, it will also save in the local storage a couple seconds later and not instantaneously, or
No, it will be almost instantaneously, because now the rating object that you are updating in your local storage is using the event target value. So it will be instantaneous. This will actually be running as your DOM is re-rendering the updated state.
Gotcha. Cool, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
One last quick question is like, how if I have to access like the same function outside of it? So here is my review movies component, and it has like all these card components.
Mhm.
Geez, where to go? Here, like this is the movie card component. So is there a way to access like this function outside in here in the parent component?
You want to be careful with that, because the question is, where is your state living? If you move that function up to the parent component and then pass it down via a prop, you also have to move the state outside of the movie card and keep track of the state up at the review movies level, because you can't update state that's in a child component in a parent component.
Okay, understood.
And that you also get tricky of, well, now I've got to keep track of multiple movies compared to keeping track of it down at the child level, where it's keeping track of its own movie's rating. So you can hoist it, you can take that whole function, move it up to the parent component, and then pass it down via a prop, and then call that function in the child component. But you just need to watch with your state, and then you're also crossing into local storage, which fortunately we'll be able to replace with the API once we learn that stuff starting at the end of next week. So up to you if you really want to hoist it out of there, because that function is updating state. You just want to be really, really careful with how you do that.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'll just leave it at that, but thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Brandy, what's up?
This is probably a silly question, but I am trying to actually, all right. 1 second, I'll just share my screen.
Sure.
Okay. I am trying to get spaces around email that don't end up being underlined.
Okay.
Like, because
really
if
it's really annoying, and there's a hack for it. Basically, spaces are kind of weird in HTML. So in the HTML way to fix this, what you would do is find this A tag, and what you would put in is what is called a non-breaking space character, which is an NBSP.
Okay.
And if I save that, you notice that space worked.
Yeah.
That's the kind of hacky HTML way of doing it and kind of annoying way of doing it. React has a slightly better way of doing it, which it says, hey, instead of doing it in your HTML, switch to JavaScript mode, make it a string, and throw a space in between it. And so believe it or not, this is actually the preferred way to do it in React.
Okay.
I wish I was making that up.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Yep.
I can't.
You can't what?
Couldn't get control of my mouse to unmute myself or mute myself, whatever.
You think it's bad with 2 monitors. I have 3 monitors open and 2 of them are 28 inches. It's like, where did my mouse go? Any other questions? Okay. So we've got our final section to do before break, and we've got our portfolio section going on here. But we're going to take even less of this, because what's the first thing that we notice when we're moving this stuff over to React? This data is getting reused. And this data is not only getting reused here, but when I hit make it rain, I'm using that data over here as well. So what we are going to do is we're going to build this out using local storage, and we're going to build it out using our reusable components. That's going to set us up really well for when we come back and have the database, so that we can pull this project information in and be able to swap out our local storage for what we're actually using, what we're actually going to be saving in the database. So I am going to take a small section of my code. I'm going to take my section, my portfolio, and my p tag, but I'm not going to take the card or the row. I'm sorry, or the column. So we want to identify what's repeating here. This row doesn't actually repeat. This row, there's only one of them. It's holding all 3 of my cards. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the row all the way up to the section and copy that. Then I'm going to come back over. I'm going to make my portfolio dot. Oh, I made a folder, not a file. Ignore me. My portfolio.js, const portfolio, return out my stuff that I copied and pasted. And now you may notice, oh my God, everything's very red. I could go back over to my HTML and figure out where my closing tags are there, but I've got a better trick for you. If you put your cursor after the div and hit enter, then do a closing tag, you will notice VS Code is going to autocomplete the matching closing tag. So I'm going to hit enter on that. Then I'm going to do another one, and you see it knows my section is the other missing closing tag. So I'm going to hit enter on that, save, pop back over to my home, put in my portfolio, look in my browser, make sure I've got my little portfolio going down here. And now I am all set to make my reusable portfolio card. All right. Let's get our card moved over as well. So I need to be very careful here because I want these columns to come over. Each card is in their own column. So it's not just the card that's repeating across all of these components. It's the column that is holding that card. So I'm going to click on my div, and this is how we avoid div soup here. We click on our div and we follow that all the way down to where it's matching in gray. That's what I want to take over for my card. So I'm going to copy that closing div all the way up to my column div, not my card div. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that. And instead of making this yet another file, which we can do and it would work, we can actually do this all in here. So we can say const card is going to return out everything that we copied and pasted over. We can fix our comment, can Command F all of our classes to our class names. And finally, I need to call this card somewhere, right? This card isn't going to show up anywhere. So if I go inside my portfolio, inside my row, I can throw in 3 cards. And I should get 3 weather apps. Excuse me. Make a new card component. We happen to make this right in the portfolio. We copied and pasted our div in. We fixed this comment here. Actually, we can take this comment out. We don't really need that. Go ahead and save. We then take that card and make sure we are calling that component inside our portfolio, inside the return of our portfolio. And if everything is working properly, we should see our 3 weather apps showing in the homepage.
What's the shortcut for that little switcheroo thing?
The closing tags?
Swap out the names.
Oh, Command F. Command F for find, and then the little arrow gives you the replace options. Any questions? Anyone need a minute? Is anyone utterly and completely lost, or do we feel like, oh, maybe this is actually sinking in? Maybe I do understand React. Okay. Got a couple things to identify here. Reusable components are great, but I can't really reuse them if all of the data on them is exactly the same. What React concept do we need to use to change this so that we can have 3 unique projects show up? Map, yes, but how do we change the data inside the components itself? Date is what we will be mapping over. Hooks are what we get our state from. We're running out of React concepts.
Wait, what was the question again?
What React concept do we need to use to change it so each one of these components will show different data? Use effect is only for controlling updates. We're not clicking on any of them to change them. Props, 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 props. We need to be able up here to be able to say, hey, the title of this project is going to be weather app. And the title of this one is going to be Netflix. And the title of this next one is, I don't even remember, feedback form. So I throw those in there and magically they don't update. Well, they don't update because I need to tell my card, hey, you are going to get a prop called title. Now, there are two ways of doing props. I happen to use what we call object destructuring, which just means putting those curly braces in there and then calling it directly by the key that we're passing in here. Now, because we're passing in that key, I can go down, find where my title is, take that out and replace it with my title. I save, I replace, I come over, and now I've got different titles. Okay. When we come back, we will take care of updating the rest of the buttons and the images and the text, but we're going to take a different approach to structuring our data. We're not going to shove it in local storage, and we're not just going to hard code it into our HTML. We're going to learn how to make our data show up in a JavaScript file and be able to import that array of objects in, map over them, and have them generate out the content that we're looking for. So take a break, be back at 7:15, a little bit earlier tonight because we're going on break earlier. Be back at 7:15 and we will keep going on this project. Popped up while I was gone.
Oh,
Yeah. Go ahead. I'll let you talk about it.
so the question we were discussing was how to get the mail form to work on the contact.
Mm-hmm.
And I was saying, I know in our cohort, we used mail this.to, but that doesn't seem to be working anymore.
Yeah, did we not connect it to... form? Oh, I thought we connected this. There's another one that I use. Crap, what website did I use that on? Caitlin uses it on her website.
If you heard the name, would you recognize it? Because
Possibly.
I Googled alternatives and it says Fab Form, Form Submit.
She uses formbold.com. You can take a look at that. So there's a website. So let me give some background on this actually before I show it. Form pretty easy to get working on our website, right? We drop in the form, we put in the contact, all of that. Now we would like that form to send us the information that got filled into it in an email to us so that we can email the person back. Well, how do we do that? If we say, oh, go send an email from my email account to myself, what prevents someone else from going on our website, hijacking our email account and sending off a bunch of spam emails from our account? There's no way front end only to be able to generate an email to get sent without running into all kinds of security issues. So once we learn how to build backend code, the backend code you can secure. You can basically say, hey, no one can just type in a to email address and send it to something else. I'm only taking these 3 form fields and including it in an email. And when that email gets sent, it only goes to this one email address. It can't be hijacked. It can't be sent to other people. However, that requires a lot of backend knowledge, which we will learn down the road, but it leaves front-end developers kind of in a lurch of, well, I want a contact form, but I don't want to have to learn how to build a whole API and integrate it to an email sender and all of that kind of stuff. So mailthis.to was a great service that I used back in cohort 3, that would let you basically send your form submission data to them, and then they would send an email on your behalf. That service, I believe, has now shut down, or if it is back in business, it's a different owner or they're charging for it or something like that. So what you can use instead, and this is one that I have used, I'm not explicitly recommending that we use, that you use it on your own site, but just to show you how a service like that works. This is not totally free, but they do have a free tier that will take 100 submissions a month. For most people, that should be more than enough. You can select that and sign up. I think I had I can sign up with your Google account. From there, you can go to forms. Again, this is formbold.com. I'll post this in the chat. You can create a new form and say this is like portfolio site. Send emails to my email address. I can click on there and it says your forms endpoint is this here. And then you see what you have to change in order to get that to work. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this, then go over to my contact form. And in the form tag, you put in 2 things. One is the action that's going to point to your form link. And then the other is called method. And this is tying to HTTP methods that you learned with Ryan. So if you go ahead and type both of those in, I believe what should then happen is that if we test this, and hit send, maybe do I have to refresh? My button needs a type of submit on it. Should not be type of button. That was a mistake on my part. You need the type submit so the button knows, hey, go submit this form to the action using form bold using a post method. So if I click send now and say I'm not a robot, it will not only say the form was submitted successfully, but in a second, I should get an email. No, showing my form was submitted. So form bold, sign up for an account. Make sure your inputs also have a name on them, not just a placeholder. So throw a name on each one of them. And save that, make sure there's a name on each one. Grab your form input, throw that in as an action on the form, change your method to post, and then make sure your button type is submit. And if you do all of that, you should get an email sent to you with your form submission. Give you guys a minute to try that if you'd like to get that working. And don't just copy and paste my action link, because then when you submit your form, I will get your emails, and that's not what you want. There's a create new button on the form. So if you create new and just name it like portfolio site, that should give you this page with the form details. And then you take this form endpoint, copy it, paste it, and say action equals that URL and change the method to post.
Where are you seeing the form, the endpoint at?
Forms, hit create new,
Yeah.
and then name the form and
Yeah.
hit create form. And then it should take you to a page that looks like this.
So I just click on the form and then, okay, cool.
Anyone get it working? We're still working on it.
You said, so when you hit create a new form, you just name it and then create form.
Yep. Sorry, it went really fast on that. I should have gone a little slower. Make sure in addition to the action and the method post, you put names on all of your inputs, because the form needs to know like what form fields you're sending it. And then also make sure your button has a type of submit down at the bottom.
How did you where'd you get the link from to put in there?
After you click, once you create the form, you just click on the form name and it should show you the form endpoint.
Okay, yeah. All right, great, thank you.
So after that, we go to form, type in action, and then we put in our endpoint and then method, and then
Method post.
button, type button.
Then put name on each one of your inputs and give it a unique name. And then down all the way at the bottom for your button, change your button type to submit.
Cool.
And then you can go test it.
It worked.
Yay.
One
your
thing I
email-
don't like though is that it takes you off of your site.
Yeah, not much control that you get over that. If you pay for it, you might be able to redirect back to your website. Yep, has custom redirects if you start paying for it. Or you can always build into your own API a form submission thing. That's a very common thing that website developers do, especially full stack developers.
Yeah, mine worked.
Cool. Anyone need another minute before we get back to React?
Just 1 minute. I'm trying to see if mine is working.
No problem.
Sorry.
It's showing that a form has been submitted, but is it going to show what that person said? Should it say what it, like, if I typed in something, should that pop up on there?
No, but in the email, it should be in the email. Cool. Good work, Tara.
It's just, for me, it just says your form got a new entry.
Did
Just
you
no.
update the inputs to include unique names on them?
You changed it. We did, yeah, name, email address, and then what else did you put a name on?
I put a name on every input. So first, last,
Okay,
email, and content.
okay, word.
Otherwise, it's getting the form submission, but it's like, I don't know what any of these inputs are, so I can't really pass them on. And then if you, after you put the names on all 4 of them, if you resubmit the form, it should have the content in the email. Cool. All right, let's get the last thing working here. I've got a lot of different projects in my portfolio, right? And we set up these cards, and these cards props will be helpful, but it would really be nice if we could just put all of this in one file, right? And that one file would have all of our project information in it, and then we can just generate the React code based off of that. So that's what we're going to set up. We're actually going to do a new file, and we're going to call it projectdata.js. Now, before, we've always just put components in separate files, right? And we know JSX supports that, but the import-export system actually supports a lot more than just components. Excuse me. It also supports JavaScript objects and arrays. So what we're going to do is we're going to say export default, and we're going to put an array with an object in there. Then we need to determine what our schema is going to be. In other words, how do we structure the data inside of our project data? Well, we know projects have names. So I'm going to say whether app, and I'll create another one, and we'll call it Netflix. But I know my projects also have summaries. So I'm going to say and then finally, we can throw in our third one. That's going to be our feedback form. Okay. And if you want to just copy and paste my whole file, that's totally fine. You can also throw in the button text. Totally fine if you want to just copy and paste that file into yours from the live stream. So we would want to use state if this data was coming down from the API and we needed to update it and render it. But this content isn't really going to change based off of a database, based off of any of that kind of information. It's kind of static, right? We want to add more projects to this portfolio, we could always come back here and add to this array, but chances are we would want to be redeploying our site when that data changed anyway. So that's why we don't need state here, because the data isn't updating. It's not user generated. It's not coming from a database. It's not coming from an API. It's not weather data. It's nothing like that. It is data, but it's data that is static, that's not changing. Because of that, if we go back over to our portfolio.js, we can actually import our projects from project data.js. And because of that, we can take our projects and map over them to get each individual project. We are also going to get the index of that project. And we're going to take that and return out a card, which is passing in the project data from the proj and the index. And then it's also going to finally also give the key. I save that, I come and I look, and now I've got a bunch of different projects here. So I'm like, okay, need to do a little cleanup. These were just my placeholders, right? This is what was working before I played with my data. So I'm going to take those cards out. I'm going to save, and now I don't have any titles and I don't have any change in content. Well, I changed my props here. So just follow along with 1 second, and I promise I'll let you catch up in a minute because we're almost at the finish line. I changed my props. I'm not passing in the title anymore. I'm passing in this entire thing called project data. So I need to change my props to use that project data. And then where's the project data coming from? Well, we can kind of trace this. Project data goes to project data. Proj goes to proj. Projects goes to projects. Project data goes all the way to my project data. That means I have my name, my summary, and my button text for each item. So I can go back to my portfolio and down in my card, say project data dot name, project data dot summary, and project data dot button text. And if I save that and take a look, I now have my 3 projects pulling from my project data. Okay, now I will pause and let you catch up. You were correct, Shannon. If you add another object to that array with all of that data, it will also show up. And you can use that same idea for your image paths as well. If you put your images in the public folder, you can add a property called image path, pass that down through your props and update that image so it is unique for each project. I can actually do that now. I just didn't want to actually go in and get the different images because I was feeling lazy. Project data, IMG URL, 1. Two. 3. But these two I flipped. Then I can go back to my portfolio, and for the image, I just take this out and I put in my project data .img URL, and I've got my 3 different projects. And hypothetically, I could even come in here and be like, I don't want to show this one. I'm so embarrassed of it. Just come in and out and it would disappear. And hypothetically, if you wanted another one, copy and paste, and just like that, we get another project showing up. Corwin.
Yeah.
You want to share your screen?
My project data aren't defined.
Go for it.
You know, it's not like I haven't been on Zoom for the past 6 months. I don't know how to work this thing.
6 months, try about 5 years for me.
Well, I guess I should show you the.
No, you're good. I know. Oh, you can share your
Wait,
screen. I
wait.
know what the problem is.
All right, but bro, where'd it go?
Request. So it's like a whole trickle down effect, right? So project data to projects, projects to projects, projects to proj to project data, and finally project data to our name, summary, and button text. See if that fixes it. Should you get a proj is not defined? Okay. Line 12. See if that fixes it. Boo. Oh, maybe not boo. There you go. Kenny, you have a question?
Um, not really, but I guess wait, why we put the index and key over there again? I mean, I know
Yeah.
why we put the key, but the index, that
The
just keep project or
We haven't used the index yet. We are going to use the index to route to a page that is specific to which one we click on.
Ah,
So we can use the index down here. We're going to change out the A tag and then use that to route to the specific project we're looking for. But I figured that would be good to probably save until tomorrow. So you don't really need this. You need the key. You don't need the index for now. We're going to use the index tomorrow.
cool.
First, of course, she gonna go open it up anyway.
All right. Any questions about this project in general? Did someone get a flicker of a light bulb moment tonight?
I would say. I feel like I was over like transferring some of the stuff over. I feel like you kind of overthink it. Like you're like, oh, I gotta change all this stuff, all this, but it's not really a huge amount of stuff that you gotta change over.
It's not a huge amount of stuff, and you feel good after you've done it because you're looking at your code and you're like, oh yeah, look, like home is like all right there, right? And I can very easily get around. And then portfolio, which is getting a little complicated, we even broke that out into like, well, here's all of like the template-y stuff, and then here's all the stuff that repeats. So now all of a sudden, this code, even though it's 47 lines on its own, becomes a lot more readable because we're using those reusable components. So it is a little trickier, right? We're using new concepts. We're using our .map. We're using our JSX syntax. We're importing things, but you're getting to a much cleaner code base by being able to kind of separate out and have those components and the data and all of that stuff.
Yeah, that for me is like the biggest part because like HTML can get so overwhelming when you're like just importing all those different links on like one page, and you got to go to each single page and have a link to each one. Like that's
You gotta learn to do it the hard way before we can teach you the easy way. Anyone need help on this project before we close the breakout room and bring everyone back in? Okie doke. Man, breakout room is not paying attention at all. No one is coming back over. Gonna get the boot 22 seconds.
I do like the little shortcut with the divs when you're changing it over because that's helpful.
Welcome back, Capstone peeps. I just posted a link in the chat to what we did tonight. So if you would like to review the code, the only real new concept that we went over was we can separate out our project data. So we made this file that's just a project data.js. We exported the default, and then what did we export out? We exported this entire array. Because we exported that array, we can import that array right here and then map over the data as if it were in state. So this is a easy way to separate out kind of your content from your HTML and make it so that we don't have to put all of that content hard-coded in to our HTML. We are able to kind of separate that out into reusable objects in an array. And because of that, we can map over them, use our props, and access that data in down here. So that's really the only new concept that we went over. Tomorrow in class, we will make it so that we can actually click on the button here and get the exact project that we clicked on, and also be able to pull in this data again so that we can link our projects together across 2 different pages and have it all work. With all of that said, I'm going to launch a poll to see if anyone is going to actually show up in person.
I have a question. Is there so if you pull that website up, like, is it gonna show your the code that you guys wrote?
The link that I just posted in chat.
Yeah, for the portfolio.
Yep, that's all the code that we wrote tonight.
Oh wait, no, I'm sorry, not not for the code. Like, if you pull up like the website, like, you know how we do npm start.
You would have to clone the whole repository and then CD down into that day 3 React portfolio, and then you could do an npm install and an npm start, and it would work.
Okay, can we just see yours though? Like, can we just see how it looks for you guys, like with it mapping over? Does it look the same?
It should look identical, yeah. So this is the React version.
Okay.
And I lied, that's not the React version. This is the HTML version, and this is the React version.
Okay. All right, that's pretty cool.
So it was intentional to make it look exactly the same, except we just kind of separate it out. So this is very clearly like all the content. Then in the portfolio, this is very clearly like all of the section around it. This is what controls making each card show up. And then we separated out the card into its own component, then use the props here. So it kind of flows through project. So button text goes to project data. Project data comes in via a prop. Project data gets passed in the prop and comes from the proj. Proj comes from the map, which is looping over the projects. The projects is coming from our project data. The project data is coming and getting in these 4 properties.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
All right, final poll of the evening is now live. There's no pressure either way. Only half of you have voted. I don't need a majority on this one. If we get five or more people saying they will show up, I will show up tomorrow at Lemoyne. Going once. Going twice. Last call to vote. Allie, you will be number 5 if you're feeling up for it. So class in person tomorrow. As always, I'll have remote set up. But if you can make it, please do. We will be at Greenwin Hall 412. I think, let me just double check that room number.
408 is where we were on Monday.
408, that's what I meant. Um. Four- 408, yes. Greenwin Hall 408. We will do whatever order you guys want to go in for capstone presentations. We will also pass around the microphone so that you can hear everyone as they present their capstone. Palash, I can see the responses, but I have to like download the Excel file and open it. And it's really weird because you can't do it from the Zoom app. You have to like click on the link and then it goes to the web portal, and the web portal lets you download it, and then you have to open it. It's a pain, but it is possible to see it. So no big deal if you are tuning in remotely. But we had a couple people say that they would show up, so we will be there. Reminder that you can park down at the bottom of the hill, down at like the athletic complex, and then walk up. I think that's a little bit closer, but then you got a hill in there, so half dozen one. Anyway, tomorrow, capstone check-in. We don't need your entire capstone over in React. What we want to see, kind of similar to last capstone check-in, we want to see a couple pages done in a couple different components with a router set up and some links between them. Doesn't have to be perfect, but we are trying to work our way, because believe it or not, there's really only one capstone check-in left after this one, right? And that's right before graduation. That's getting everything working full stack. So next week, different change of pace. We're going into SQL land. SQLs may be one of the only things that we learn that isn't dependent on everything else that we have learned so far. So if you are feeling desperately far behind, SQL is a complete chance to reset, kind of work your way on different syntax, no JavaScript involved whatsoever. Couple programs that we'll install, we'll go through Khan Academy, we'll go through that. Then the following week is when we start full stack, and that is where all the puzzle pieces really start coming together. And we start seeing, hey, we can not only write a fetch request to make it show up in our React, but we can also put our own data into that, and we can use Postman, and we can pull all of the things in that we've been learning. So that's what's coming down the pipeline. I will stick around for at least another 10 minutes in case anyone has capstone questions. Otherwise, you guys are welcome to get out a little early.
If we don't have routes set up for like every page, and well, not every page, obviously, but like, well, in terms of routes, what do you want to see?
Just 2 or 3, like just your home page and maybe a link on your home page to another page, and that's all that really matters.
All right, works.
Basically, we're going for, hey, are you not afraid of React, and do you have something set up, right? Because the hardest part of getting any project started is like just starting it and getting the files there. So once you get that momentum, that's enough for this check-in. Jen, what's up?
I just need a little bit of help moving stuff around on one of these pages. It's not working in the CSS, so I'm a little confused.
Sure, share screen. I don't know why I get the hiccups only while I'm teaching. It's so annoying. All day, no hiccups.
I put are you drinking?
Water. Oh, you can't even see my glass. Just water. I promise I don't hit the whiskey until 8:30.
I tried putting like border radius on it. It's not working. I had to, in order to move all these around, I had to Palash showed me how to put the M5 in each one.
Ooh, that's fancy. I don't even know what M5 is.
I know now.
It's like it's a class that adds margin bootstrap class. Sorry.
Oh, nice.
It's great. But I'm
Okay,
having trouble
so
like styling it and I can't figure out why.
so you have input box and border radius. And over here, you've got your input box. And in your app.js, you've got your CSS imported. Then you broke it.
What's new? Right?
Uh, oh, got it. Input box isn't actually on your input, it's on a div. So we're rounding out the entire div, which is including the span. What we want to be doing is rounding out the input inside of the input box. So input
so-
box, even though you called it, input box is this whole div right here.
Okay, so if there was like a border on that, I would see it around the full name and the input box.
Yeah, so if we take this out and say border 2px solid pink, because what screams better than pink and orange?
Okay. And now, so I don't need that important.
No. Well, hopefully not.
Uh,
Hopefully it's not important.
Hopefully not. And then, why? See, it's not doing,
Because it's still, I took out the
Is it?
input.
and now why did, like, why didn't this whole thing work to get them to move? I had to put the M5s in everywhere.
I have to see it not working in order to see it. So I'm gonna just replace all the M5s with MM5s because I hope there's not anything called MM5, and that way I can always put them back. So what you were trying to get them to do was like have space between them.
Yeah, just,
So this is centering everything vertically, and
Okay.
this is centering everything horizontally. But what you're trying to go for is flexing them in between. So there is a
flex column not,
flex column is making it flex up and down instead of left to right. So there is a, and I don't know the bootstrap for it. If bootstrap doesn't have it, we can try and do it in the CSS. Why in God's name, Google pisses me off sometimes. Why would you link me to version 4 when version 5 is right here and clearly the one everyone is using? Direction, justify. So you've got everything going on like this, and you really want everything going on like this. So that is justify content around instead of justify content center. Well, all right, let's put this back to center. The problem is everything's inside this content div.
okay.
So if we justify content around and flex it and tell it that the area that it can grow into is like 300 pixels? And spell height right? God damn it.
The inputs are all still inside the form.
Oh, thank you, Doug.
So you could give the form a class and then have that class tell.
Or user details all in that. User, no, those are all separate. Okay, so this
I don't know,
goes,
don't yell at me. I just copy and pasted this when I looked up a login form.
as long as you understand it, that's what really
I
matters.
did, but I was like, why did I do the biggest one I could possibly find?
There you go. I don't know if you need all of these. Flex is, oh, yes, you most certainly do. Flex is one of those things that you just like fuck with it until it shows up the way you want it to, and then you call it a day. User details I can put in here. I mean, Flex is one that you deeply want to study and understand the intricacies of it, as I do.
Oh, yeah.
And then if I take off the height, see, it needs the height to know that there's like, how does it know how much space to put around each one of them unless it knows how big they should be?
So I can't do like view height or VH.
You can do VH. You could do like 50 VH.
Ew.
Well, there's a reason I didn't do it in the first place.
I'm gonna let you do this and be like, okay, but no, I know I want it.
And then if you do min height is always better to do than actual height, because that way if the screen gets super squished, it's not going to start scrolling or putting components on top of each other. It will like give it at least enough space that it needs to show all of them without crunching on top of each other.
Okay. Now I just gotta figure out how to get them in line. And then take the move the text away from the boxes a little bit.
Have fun.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, I just have a quick question too. I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I didn't know if anybody was next. So I got my stuff to show up, like my HTML to show up in my React app. Now it won't show my logo, even though I moved it over from like the
Share your
PNG
screen.
file.
You-
All right. Okay, give me 1 sec.
Images are kind of tricky in React. I think we covered them yesterday, but good to review.
Okay, so let me minimize this for a second. More share screen. Yep. Okay, this is my full screen. Okay, so here's that. This is my, I know it's kind of like crazy over here. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're fine. So two different, well, first of all, we only want to move the body over into our React components. We don't want the head and the HTML tag and all of that stuff coming over. That's a big no-no. So we're going to take these out
Okay.
and the body out too. And then we'll clean that out down here. Okay, that made Prettier happy. Now there's two
Oh.
ways of making our images show up. One is if we put it in the SRC folder, we have to import the SCSD logo from our SCSD logo.png. And then now that we've got it imported, we go find that image and we use our curly braces because we're importing it and say SCS. SCSD logo. And that should make it show up.
Okay. That's
The
nice.
other way of doing it is if you like that source tag being a string and you don't like having to do these imports, you can move this logo into the public folder and then it would have worked.
Ah, okay. So, oh shoot, where did it just go? Okay. Okay, so my next question was what was I gonna, so for the CSS for this, am I putting it in app CSS or do I have to create another CSS folder?
You can put it in app.css as long as you're okay with everything in that CSS file applying to all of your pages.
Okay, yeah, no. All right. Well, will this app.js folder apply to all of my
Yep, which is
Wow.
why I recommended setting up the router first, then creating the components for the router, then moving the HTML into that.
Okay. Yeah, okay. All right. I'll see if there's like one-on-one time tomorrow, because I don't know.
So review any of the projects we've done in the past 2 weeks, because those all have the router set up, they're separate files. It can be blog, it can be the portfolio that we did tonight, it can be really any of them. It's just getting multiple pages set up, and that's the primary point for the primary reason for the checkpoint tomorrow.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Yep. Plush.
How can we style a variable that has been updated using state? Like
You have to pass it into the style prop.
can I share my screen?
Mhm.
Okay. Okay, so like I'm supposed to style this. So other than like putting strong tag around it, like how can I like bolden this?
So do you have that in state already?
Yes, that has been updated using the state. So
Okay. What's the name of the variable in state?
a common movie, set common movie.
Okay, so I'm going to move it to a span tag.
Okay.
And then what you can do is throw style on this
Oh,
that says the font weight of this is going to be, and then if the I'm not going to be able to get your logic. So if like common movie equals Warhorse 1,
right.
then make this bold. Otherwise, make it normal.
Gotcha. I see what you mean.
So that makes it bold. And then hypothetically, if I take out a letter here, it removes the boldness.
Makes sense. Thank you.
That along the lines of what you're trying to go for?
Yes. Can it also be done like on the side in a CSS file? I mean, not really necessary. Just curious. Okay.
No, because the CSS doesn't get access to state like the component does, which is why inline styles are more common in React. One, if we're doing a lot of styling, it's better to make it its own separate component. And then that way the styling, the logic, the state, all of that can be in its one logical file instead of one giant one.
But theoretically, like you can give this, like wrap it around a div with a class and then go into CSS.
You can do it like this as well. You can say class name equals, and then you can't use a template literal unless it's in curly braces, but you could say, you could move this into that, and then your classes would be bold or normal, and then you could style bold to be whatever color or whatever CSS properties you wanted.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep. But one or the other, you usually don't want to do both.
Okay. Thank you.
Ali, React's own CSS styling is just regular CSS, except instead of dashes, you camel case the properties. But the CSS is still the same. It's not like its own styling language. It's still using CSS. It's just the way we write it in an inline prop is a little different.
No, what I was referring to was because when I had this loaded with just like vanilla JS, the buttons look different. Like they look a little bit more updated using the code in React as opposed to just vanilla.
It's probably because you haven't moved Bootstrap over.
Okay, that makes sense.
And we did that in tonight's project as well. If you want to review the video, we moved Bootstrap over in that. Yeah, Corwin, you hit the nail on the head there. All right, we're gonna get out of here 8 minutes earlier. Does anyone else have a question?
For that styling, you can do that. You can do that inline, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
But if you're doing it in an external file, one, you have to be careful because that external file can apply to all the pages. So that's when we need to use SAS to make sure it doesn't. And then two, you're not using the React syntax, even though you're in React. If you're in a .css file, you just use regular CSS, or .scss, you still use the regular CSS syntax with
Alright,
a
that
couple
makes
things
sense.
added on top of that.
How do you go about applying a background image to all pages?
Good question. So you're going to want to do it in your up at your app level, because your app level is what contains everything. You can come in here and then say your style is going to have a min height of 100 VH. That way the container knows to get as big as it needs to. And then I'm going to just go grab we still have R2D2 from last night. Hey. I'm gonna grab him and I'm gonna say inside this, I'm gonna use a background image that is a URL that links to that PNG. This happens to be coming off the internet, but if you wanted to use this exact code, you'd have to put your image in public, the public folder. And if we load this, we get R2D2 in the background. And then you can use, background stretch and background repeat and all of those properties as well. But because it's here, even if I don't have another page set up, but even if I went to another page, this would still apply to it because this is sitting outside of the router.
That makes sense. Appreciate that.
Yeah, Shay, you if you put it in the public folder, just anywhere in the public folder, you just reference it / and then whatever their file name is dot whatever. But if you want to make an images folder inside the public folder, you can do that. Just make sure that when you reference it in your SRC, you do /images / and whatever the file name is.
Appreciate it.
Yep. Shannon wants to get sassy. Okay. Let me set up another component really quickly. No, not print. Page 2.js. I British there accidentally. App.js. Let me throw this in. Okay. If I make a file called page2.css and I throw an H1 on with a color of red, and then I'm in my home and I also put an H1 in there that says home. When I import page 2, and put a link to my homepage in here, what happens is when I go to my page 2, my H1 is red, but if I click on home, I can have it red in here. And I'm like, no, I only want it to be red on my page 2, right? So what I do is this should all be in one giant div, my bad. I put a div around everything in my page 2 and I add an ID of page 2 here. I then go to my page2.css and put everything inside something that says page 2. The problem is I'm not allowed to use the syntax in regular CSS. So what I have to do instead is Control-C to stop my server, npm install sass, rename my page2.css to page2.scss, and also change my import to .scss. If I do all of that, when I npm start my project, I now have home in black and my H1 here in black. But if I go to my page 2, I still have it in red. Did that help?
Yes, so we'll be using that if we have more than one page, basically.
And you want your CSS to only apply to that specific page. Yes. Some people are madmen or mad people and just put all of their app.css in one page and like just go from there. There are, to be fair, in a large application, there are times where I'm like, I just want class name bold to exist everywhere. If I want to make something bold, I don't want to have to fucking do the font weight 900 times, you know, like just make bold apply everywhere. So there are times that I will have an app.css that applies to everything, but at work, we definitely do a separate CSS file for every single component. And then we use Sass to make sure it only applies to that ID. To that ID. And if you need me to go over that tomorrow, again, there's no shame in asking for that because that was pretty quick. Or just watch the recording from tonight. All right, 1 minute warnings. Anyone have any pressing questions?
No, but Max, I'm gonna cancel our one-on-one tomorrow because
Okay,
I
bye.
got what I needed. Bye.
Good work.
Thank you.
And I will go clear that in my calendar. So if someone else wants to go poach Jen's one-on-one, you can. It's fine. I don't have a life anyway.
Stop the cap.
All right. Have a good evening, everyone. I will see you tomorrow, hopefully in person, if not remotely. Yeah.